Everyone says one frame can't make a difference. I mean, it's just one number. If your game is running at 60 FPS and suddenly drops to 59, that's only one less frame every second. You probably shouldn't even notice it. So why does it sometimes feel like your game went from buttery smooth to strangely uncomfortable? It's one of those things almost every PC gamer has experienced. You're playing. Everything feels great. Your aim feels responsive. Movement feels clean. Then you glance at your FPS counter. 60. Nothing else changed. Your GPU isn't suddenly melting. Your CPU isn't panicking. The graphics settings are exactly the same. But somehow, the game just feels off. It's weird. And if you've ever lowered every graphics setting just to get that perfect locked 60 back, you're definitely not the only one. At first it sounds ridiculous. How could one missing frame possibly ruin everything? Well, the funny thing is, it usually isn't that missing frame. It's what happened to make that frame disappear. Think about clapping to a beat. Clap, clap, clap. Every clap lands exactly when you expect it. Now imagine someone misses the timing by just a tiny bit. Not a full second, not even half a second. Just enough that your brain notices something isn't lining up anymore. That's exactly what your eyes are doing with your game. They're not counting frames. They're noticing rhythm. Most people think FPS is the thing that determines smoothness. And they're not completely wrong. Higher FPS usually is smoother. But FPS is only telling you how many frames showed up. It doesn't tell you when they showed up. And that's where things get interesting. Imagine your friend tells you he'll text you every minute. 1 minute passes. Text. Another minute. Text. Another minute. Text. Everything feels predictable. Now imagine the next messages come after 30 seconds. Then 90. Then 45. Then 75. You're still getting the same number of texts. They're just arriving at weird times. That's basically what inconsistent frame pacing looks like. The number of frames might barely change, but their timing does. And your brain is surprisingly good at noticing that. Let's say your monitor refreshes 60 times every second. Every refresh is like a bus arriving at a station. Your GPU's job is simple. Have the next frame ready before the bus leaves. At exactly 60 FPS, your GPU hands over one frame. Every single refresh. It's a perfect rhythm. Every bus leaves with a passenger. Everything stays smooth. But the moment your frame takes just a little too long, the bus leaves without it. Now the monitor has no choice but to show the previous frame again. Then the new one arrives just after. To your eyes, it feels like the game hesitated. Not because one frame vanished forever, but because one frame showed up late. Here's where vsync makes things even stranger. When vsync is on, your monitor refuses to show a frame halfway through a refresh. It waits, which sounds like a good thing. No screen tearing. Nice clean image. But there's a catch. If your GPU misses that tiny refresh window, even by the smallest amount, the monitor waits for the next one. Instead of showing a frame after about 16.7 milliseconds, it might wait another full refresh. Suddenly, that frame is over 30 milliseconds old. And that's not a 1 FPS difference anymore. That's a noticeable hitch. It's why a game can report 59 FPS, yet feel much rougher than the number suggests. Now let's make it even weirder. Sometimes your FPS counter lies to you. Well, not exactly. It's telling the truth, just not the whole truth. Imagine your game displays 60 frames this second. Perfect. Except 55 of those frames arrived perfectly on time, and the last 5 all showed up in a little burst. The counter still says 60, but your eyes don't experience 60 evenly spaced moments. They experience smooth, 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 stutter. This is why two games can both say they're running at 60 FPS. Yet one feels dramatically smoother than the other. Because frame rate and frame pacing aren't the same thing. Game engines can cause this too. Loading new areas, streaming textures, compiling shaders, background CPU tasks, garbage collection. A Windows update deciding now is somehow the perfect time to wake up. Any of these can delay just a single frame. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Not because your computer suddenly became slow, but because it broke the rhythm. This is also why competitive players obsess over frame time graphs, not just FPS counters. A flat frame time graph means every frame is arriving like clockwork. A spiky graph means some frames are taking much longer than others, even if the average FPS looks great. In fact, Many experienced PC players would rather have a perfectly stable 60 FPS than a wildly bouncing 90 to 120, because consistency almost always feels better than unpredictability. So, does 59 FPS actually feel worse than 60? Sometimes, but not for the reason most people think. Your eyes aren't noticing that one missing frame. They're noticing the broken rhythm that often comes with it. The tiny delay, the missed refresh, the uneven timing. That's the real culprit. Which means the next time your game suddenly feels a little strange, don't just look at the FPS number. Look at what's happening between those numbers. Because sometimes, the smoothest gaming experience isn't about getting more frames. It's about making every single one arrive exactly when it's supposed to. And once you realize that, you'll never look at an FPS counter the same way again.